Right, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you for everybody that's been able to join. This is the fourth out of four of our four-part virtual education series on EV charging and everything you need to know. We saved a fun one for the end here. We're going back to all about purchasing an EV. What does that mean? If I'm looking at a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, or a full EV vehicle, what should I know? And what do I need to take a look at for that as I get started? So I've got some great speakers that are here with me today. From Blue Whale, we've got John Carper, and from Blink, we've got Randy Etman. I'm going to let both of them introduce themselves, but just as a fun thing we're going to do for this particular webinar, we're going to talk about what we all drive. So my name's Nick McNulty. I'm sure if you've been at some of the other webinars, you've seen me speak. I'm a director here at Blue Whale EV. And I drive the plug-in hybrid Jeep, the 4xe. So I'll be able to speak about that a little bit today. John, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm John Carper. I'm one of the account executives, as Nick had mentioned. I am all in on EV. That's why I'm on. I've had a Tesla Model 3 that is about 7 years old. It's got 200,000 miles on it, and I have a Rivian as well. So that's what I drive.
Excellent. And Randy?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, John, for having me be a part of your presentation today. Certainly, we very much here at Blink enjoy the partnership that we have with Blue Whale EV, and happy to be participating today. So I'm Randy Etman. I'm Senior Director of Sales for Blink, covering North America. I drive a plug-in hybrid EV as well, a BMW X5. And I myself have been in the EV space since the early days of this industry. So I started in this industry back in 2013 when there was really just a couple of cars initially on the road, the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf. And Tesla was just starting to come out at that point in time with the Model S, and actually the first vehicle being the Roadster that they had out. But certainly a pleasure to be here this afternoon.
Excellent. Really excited to jump into this. I think we've got two of the biggest EV enthusiasts I've met in the industry so far with us today. So excited to see where that goes. As we go through the slides today, I always like to start by sharing some of the questions that we get frequently about EVs, plug-in EV hybrids, and hybrid vehicles themselves. So what you see on the screen today is primarily what we're going to start to answer through the presentation today, but we'll also jump back into some of these questions at the end. If you have any questions that you have specifically as we go through the slides today, please feel free to post them in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we will try to answer those as we go through. If for whatever reason you come up with a question later, we'll share the info. We're going to send out the slides as well as the video probably early next week. So feel free to reach back out and ask us those questions if you don't want to ask them today. But as we go through, we're going to talk a little bit about who Blue Whale EV is first. If you've been joining us from the beginning, you probably have a good idea. But if this is your first time hopping on, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is that we do. We are a fully turnkey EV installation company for charging stations. The nice thing is we've got all of our electricians, our estimators, our engineers. They're here on staff, so you're not having to worry about GCs or middlemen. The idea is that we're going to come out, we're going to take care of you all the way from the beginning when you're just learning about what is EV, which is part of today, into what type of charging stations am I going to need to power those EVs, all the way through the installation process. And then we can even help you take a look at, are there rebates or incentives that I might be able to get to help me offset some of that cost and get me closer to a return on investment quicker, right? So that's what Blue Whale EV does. We've got three founders of our company, Rich, Scott, and Scott. We also have a full team of about 100 employees on the electrical and EV side that are here to support you as you take a look at, dipping your toe into the world of EV, right? We serve all the areas of the Mid-Atlantic. We're starting to expand out from there. And as Randy will let you know, he's down in Florida, and Blink has a national footprint. So for all of us, wherever you are, wherever you're joining us from today, we're going to be able to help take care of you, answer any questions you might have as it pertains to EV. So with that, we're going to jump in to the difference between hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and EV. I'm going to hand the mic over to John, our resident enthusiast, and see what he has that he can share with us. So John, why don't you jump in and start with what is a hybrid vehicle?
All right. Yeah. So a hybrid vehicle was, I guess, the first foray into electrifying a vehicle. And really, it was kind of Toyota that started it with the Prius. I think we're all pretty familiar with Priuses at this point. A great car. It's been around a very long time. Um, and basically, a hybrid vehicle is just a vehicle that has a very small battery, approximately on average 1 kilowatt hour. And we'll touch on the size of the batteries on some of the other electrified vehicles as we move through. But you don't plug it in. The battery just charges when the car comes to a stop via something called regenerative braking, which is something we'll touch on more as well as we move through. So that's basically a hybrid vehicle. So yeah, they've been around for probably at least 20 years now, and the Prius was probably the most common one. All right, Nick, if you want to move to the next slide.
So
All
how's that
right,
different
so
from a plug-in, John?
how is the hybrid different from a plug-in hybrid?
Yeah,
This,
is it in the name?
and so basically with a plug-in hybrid, it has a bigger battery and you're able to plug it in. And this can be a great commuter car, basically because typically a plug-in hybrid can go anywhere from 30 to 50 miles purely electric. There's some outliers out there that go all the way up to 75, as you see in the third bullet, but I'm not, there's not many of those. The average is 30 to 50 miles on a plug-in hybrid. And so, I mean, you could load it up with gas, and I think typically you can get 600 to 700 miles out of a tank of gas. But if you live in Annapolis and you just stay in Annapolis, you probably could just get gas once every 6 months if you never leave Annapolis, because you can just plug in when you get home and just run on electric all the time. So it makes sense for people that might have things called range anxiety, because once you do run out of electric after, say, that 50 miles, then it just kicks right over to gasoline, and you know no need to worry about finding a charging station. So next
Absolutely.
slide.
All right.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about what is an EV? What's a battery powered EV?
All right, so an EV is 100% electric. And the size of I should have said the plug-in hybrid battery is typically about 10 kilowatts. I should have mentioned that when we were on plug-in hybrids. But so the battery size on a BEV, or fully electric vehicle, they usually start around 50 kilowatt hours. And now with some of the pickup trucks that you're starting to see, like the Chevy Silverado, the Hummer EV, that has a 200 kilowatt hour battery. So obviously there is no gasoline, there are no fumes, there's no exhaust, and there's a heck of a lot less moving parts. And we will touch on that a little bit as we move forward. But yeah, that's where my heart kind of lies. I went straight from a diesel Volkswagen Touareg, which I was towing a camper, straight to a Tesla, Model 3. But anyway, so that hopefully that answers your questions as far as what the three types of vehicles are.
All right.
So
So tell
next
us a little
slide.
bit about what's available for people to buy today.
Yeah, so this guy's a little bit older. If you look March 3rd of 2023, there were 40 electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles. Now there's actually, I think there's 50, a little bit over 50 available in the US that are fully electric. And there's a list there of most of them. I think there's another page too, right, Nick?
There
With
is. Yep.
some of the
These are your
other ones.
plugins.
Yeah, so these are the plug-in hybrids that are currently available. And I would say that the hybrids are really giving way to the plug-in hybrids. People want to be, more green or greener. And the plug-in hybrid, obviously, you can be fully electric if you don't do a lot of driving every day. You can just plug it in and run on electric. So yeah, the market share for the plug-in hybrids is growing, where it's just the straight hybrids is falling now at this point. So.
Got it. So John, which one's going to be right for me? Can you tell me?
Well, I mean, I would say, if you really are worried about you're going to be taking a lot of long trips. I would think maybe a plug-in hybrid might make more sense than a fully electric vehicle. The hybrid itself, just by itself, it's basically a gasoline car that just gets a little bit better gas mileage. It's, with a 1 kilowatt hour battery, I would think that a plug-in hybrid, if you want to, start to electrify your transportation, you would at least want to go with a plug-in hybrid. Um, there's definitely advantages. You don't have to worry about range anxiety because you always have the gas backup. Um, the battery life, they last a long time. Um, and like I said, the environmental footprint, if you don't do a lot of driving, you can be fully on electric. So
Great. And then
that can
the
make sense for,
difference
yeah.
with battery electric, right? So some of the differences there. Why might I choose that instead?
Well, if you want to be 100% green all the time, if you want to have, less maintenance, the performance of a fully electric vehicle, I think everyone's heard that, the electric vehicles have instant torque, which is, it's kind of addicting, off a traffic light, getting out into traffic, an unprotected left, when you're worried about getting out into traffic and you hit it, you go instantly because it doesn't need to drop down into a lower gear to have the torque that, a gasoline engine would have. Um, the less moving parts, the maintenance. I mean, I'm kind of partial to fully electric vehicles. I've never had a plug-in hybrid, but there's just I feel like fully electric vehicles make sense 90% of the time for 90% of the people out there. And we'll touch on that a little bit more as we move forward. So
Sure.
that's my feeling. Yep.
Okay. Well, I know there's all sorts of common fears we hear about, right? And I think we're
Right.
battling a game of misinformation a lot of the time, how it refers to EV and some of the common fears we hear from people. John, I know you've run into a number of different situations like this, and you've got some great stories that you can share. So
Yeah.
maybe you can tell me a little bit about, what is range anxiety? And how do we combat that if we're converting all the way to EV and not just a plug-in or a standard hybrid?
So, I mean, the term range anxiety is pretty self-explanatory, but you're worried about running out of battery and being stuck in the middle of nowhere without a charging station close by. So, I'll start with kind of my day, the way my day started today. I have an unusually lot of driving today, and I left my house up in Crownsville, and I had to go all the way to Southern Maryland, down to Solomon's Island for a site walk. And when I got down there, I had a conference call, so I did hit a charger just to top off. And then now I'm actually in Prince Frederick, which is halfway back up through Southern Maryland, and I have a dinner in Ocean City. And I drove my Tesla Model 3 with 200,000 miles on it, which has had some battery degradation. So I get about 270 miles at a full charge right now. And I will tell you, I have no range anxiety. Now, I've been doing this for a long time. Um, but as far as range anxiety goes, the way I kind of look at it is, and obviously that may not, give comfort to the people that haven't bought an EV and they're not that familiar with it. But I kind of believe range anxiety, once you educate yourself, really is a thing of the past. And let me kind of explain. So, when EVs first came out, um, the charging infrastructure was mediocre at best, especially if you didn't have a Tesla. Now, Tesla's got a fantastic charging network, and there's good news regarding that they've opened that up to all the other manufacturers here in North America. So that was a huge stepping stone. So, right now it's Ford's on it, GM's on it, Rivian's on it, Hyundai, Kia jump on in January, Mercedes, BMW, they're all going to be jumping on in the spring. So that's good. That will help along with range anxiety. But even aside from that, if you just think of, if you just kind of look and see, okay, the number one selling car on the globe in 2023 was a fully electric vehicle. It was launched in 2020. It's twice the price of the number two selling car on Earth, which is the Toyota Corolla, which has been around for 40 years. So I guess my thoughts are, if range anxiety was that big of a deal, and then to top it all off, this car that was the number one selling car on earth in 2023 was never even advertised. It was all word of
Hmm.
mouth. So if you're curious what that car might be, it was the Tesla Model Y. So, when someone buys a Tesla Model Y, they tell their friends and their friends tell their friends. And I feel like if range anxiety was really warranted, that car never would have went from just being launched in 2020 to being the number one selling car in the world 3 years later. So
Yeah.
that's just one example. A couple other things that I kind of like to touch on is I like to talk a little bit about rideshare drivers, your Lyft drivers, your Uber drivers. These guys drive all day, every day, and they're all converting over to EVs and time's money. They have to stop and charge sometimes during the day, obviously. They wouldn't be switching over if they had range anxiety. People will come to me and they'll say, "Well, I'm so worried about where am I going to charge, or you know, am I going to run out of battery?" And these people, the average commute in the U.S. is 16 miles one way, so 30 miles round trip. Most EVs now are getting 300 miles of range. So on a daily basis, it's the best commuter car you could ever have. I mean, if you live in Annapolis and you drive to DC and you drive back, you're looking at about probably $5 total cost in electricity round trip each day. And you don't
Wow.
even have to worry about charging if you can charge at home. So, it's a great commuter car. Now, I think when people usually think of range anxiety too, they're thinking about maybe a road trip, for example. You know, um, if you're going to jump in your car in Washington, D.C. and drive down to Key West. Years ago, it took some planning. Now, I would say now, these EVs, the GPSs, they plan out your route for you. In a Tesla, for example, when I'm on my way to a charger, I know exactly how much charge I'm going to have when I get there and how long I need to be there to continue my trip. It's all planned out. It's almost dummy proof right now, and so just about all the cars have that capability. So that's my kind of thoughts on range anxiety. I mean, one of our um, one of our employees here, actually a Blue Whale, he bought a Kia, or it was a Hyundai. It was either the Hyundai or the Kia. I kind of get them mixed up from time to time, but the range on that car is only 220 miles, and he's had it, I mean, I think like 3 months now. And he took a trip to New York and he jumped on an app called PlugShare. And I would recommend anybody that's going to buy an EV, you could go to plugshare.com or download the app PlugShare, and you will be blown away by the number of chargers that you actually see that are out there. There's tons of chargers now. The infrastructure has actually gotten so much better in just the last 2 to 3 years. Um, so
And I think you touched on a really good topic, which was the battery life. I think we hear a lot about people fearing having to
okay,
replace a battery. Can you
right,
share if you've
yeah,
had to replace a battery yet or what that looks
yeah,
like for your car?
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the cost to replace a battery, I guess my thoughts on the battery. I have over 200,000 miles on my Tesla, and my battery is degraded about 10%. Typically, the batteries, the NCM batteries, nickel, cobalt, manganese batteries, are designed to last between 3 and 500,000 miles. The newer LFP batteries that you're starting to see are less expensive. They don't quite have the energy density, but they're designed to last 1 million miles. It is very, very rare that you ever have to replace a battery. And I mean, kind of my thoughts on the battery replacement. I mean, from what I understand, it's somewhere around $6,000 to $8,000 to replace a battery, but the chance of actually having to do it is so slim. Um, I think, the Tesla Model 3 has been around about 6 years right now. And if these batteries were dying left and right, I can assure you, you'd be hearing about it in the news all the time because
Yep.
if it bleeds, it leads, and you're not hearing about it. The batteries, they last. And as far as the warranties go in North America, the the federal government, I can't remember what department of the federal government, but they said that the powertrain warranty, which is the battery warranty, and the drive unit, which is basically it's basically the same as like the engine and transmission wrapped into one box about the size of two footballs. And there's advantages to that as well. Um, they said that the warranty for that is a minimum of 100,000 miles. So like in the Teslas, it's 100, 120, or 150,000 miles for like the S and the X, which are the two more expensive models that have been out a little bit longer than the 3 and the Y. Um, I never heard about anybody's battery going bad. I mean, it happens. You see it in social media and you hear about it in social media, but um, yeah, no,
Well, I think that's a good segue
it's worth the
into
risk.
some of
Yeah,
the EV
maintenance.
maintenance, right? So, can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about what that looks like?
So here's one of the biggest pluses about EVs that you don't hear about. I mean, everyone knows that it's less expensive. It's about a quarter of the price to move the car from A to B, gasoline versus fully electric. But the maintenance is beautiful. Beautiful in the sense that there isn't any. There literally is zero routine maintenance with an EV. You do have to rotate your tires, but that's not maintenance in the way and wash your fluid. That's it. There is no other maintenance with an EV. Not that things don't break, and when things do break, you know, they can be a little bit more expensive than a gasoline car to repair. But at the same time, in the long run, EVs are much less expensive to maintain over time. That's the fact. You could Google that. Actually, if you were to Google right now, moving parts, EV versus ICE, what you'll see, at least when I Googled this morning, I mean, I already knew this, but I wanted a few facts to throw out. There's about 20 moving parts in an electric vehicle, a fully electric vehicle. And that's the disadvantage that a plug-in hybrid has over an EV is it is a gasoline car primarily. It just has a small battery. But a fully electric vehicle has 20 moving parts, whereas a gasoline or combustion engine vehicle has as many as 2,000 moving parts. Well, anything that moves breaks down over time and requires maintenance. If you open up the hood of a regular combustion engine car, you're going to see belts, hoses, fluids. All these things need to be maintained. If you open up the hood of many of the EVs on the market, it's a nice area where you have storage. You could maybe put things in there like a laptop that you don't want visible, in the car. Some people use it to pick up. I've heard of people using the frunk is what they're called in an EV to pick up maybe smelly carryout
Yeah.
because it's up front. There's just so many advantages when it comes, to maintenance. And it's funny when I was charging not too long ago down in California, Maryland, I thought to myself, I haven't actually looked at my brake pads in a while. And I got out of my car while it was charging, and I looked at my brake pads, and I swear, and I'll show everyone this at the office when we get back, I have yet to change my brake pads, and I have 210,000 miles on the car. And I looked at them, and they still look brand new, which blows me away. Because if you Google it, it just says generally you don't need to change your brake pads to well over 100,000 miles. Well, I'm at 200,000. And it makes sense because another beautiful part of EVs is when you let off the gas, the car comes to a stop on its own. So if you're not an aggressive driver, you really never have to use the brakes. So they could last almost indefinitely. It's really just if you're coming up on a yellow light and you have to hit your brakes or somebody in front of you slams on their brakes. That's the only time you really ever engage the brake pads, themselves.
Well, I
Just a
know I
big
will be
plus.
thinking about you the next time I have to go get my oil changed in my plug-in hybrid, thinking about the fact that maybe I need to make an adjustment. But what about winter weather driving, John? Do
Yeah,
they
so
do they perform well in the winter? Do you lose any battery charge? What does that look like?
so here's another thing that it kind of takes me back to like the range anxiety. Things have gotten much better over time. This is a relatively new technology. So as far as winter weather driving, when EVs first came out, they weren't using heat pumps. They didn't have to because gasoline cars basically use the heat from the engine to warm the cabin. Well, back in 2020, Tesla started putting heat pumps in their cars, just like the heat pumps that you have in your home, and they're much more efficient. So, winter weather driving, if you're going to buy an EV and you're in a very cold climate, you want to make sure that it has a heat pump. Most of the newer EVs coming out now all have heat pumps. All the Teslas from 2020 forward have heat pumps. Another thing that's worth mentioning is it just takes some education driving in the winter. You do lose some range, but the heat pumps are making a huge difference. Norway, for example, their EV adoption rate is 90%. 9 out of every 10 cars purchased today in Norway, it's actually greater than that. I think it's 93 to be precise. Um, they're EVs. Norway's a cold place. And Um, it's really just a matter of, you want to plug it at night, precondition the battery before you go to charge. Um, if you're like, most of the EVs now, if you're on your way to a fast charger, it automatically warms the battery. That's one of the issues with driving in the winter and charging is it charges slower if the battery's cold. So most of the EVs now, if you plug in that you're on your way to a charger, it automatically starts to warm the battery up. So yeah,
That's great.
with the weather driving, it's not the issue that it once was. I mean, the technology for everything just keeps getting better and better.
So the last one that I want to ask about is safety, right? So we hear, and I think it's
Okay.
another bit of sensational news, right? But we hear about the batteries and we hear about safety and that kind of piece of it. What have you seen? What have you heard, John, about how that compares to ICE and where does safety really fall into place?
Right.
Where are these vehicles at?
So EVs are extremely safe. So we'll just tackle the one thing that you do tend to hear, EVs catching on fire. Well, the likelihood of an EV catching on fire is 10 to 20 times less, Google it, than an internal combustion engine car. They catch on fire all the time. EVs very seldom catch on fire. So that is just an absolute myth, wives' tale that EVs, catch on fire. They do, but the likelihood of a gas car catching on fire is so much more. You just don't hear about it in the news. Happens all the time. There's another thing that I wanted to touch on too is like when you think of safety, if you look at all the crash testing out there and the mortality rates with accidents with EVs, try to speed this up real quick, but the center of gravity in EV is very, very low. Most people die for two reasons in car accidents. One, the car rolls and you get thrown, and then you get thrown out of the car, and that results in a fatality. The likelihood of an EV rolling is much, much less due to the center of gravity. So that's the one reason why the mortality rate's much lower with EVs. And then finally, crumple zones. The other reason people die in car accidents is head-on collisions. And when you're in an EV, if you do get into a head-on collision, you have a very nice crumple zone in the front. You don't have an engine block that could wind up in your lap. So for this reason, EVs alone from as far as like if you look at all the different crash studies out there, they're much safer than your typical combustion engine car. So hopefully that kind of covers it. On the driver's assistance program, so, software in the EVs is just superior to most of the gasoline cars because an EV is basically a computer on wheels. So the driver assistance safety features that they have are as a whole are much more robust than what you're going to see with a combustion engine car. So I think that covers safety pretty well.
No, I think that's great. If I wasn't sold yet, I think I'd be buying an EV. So thank you,
Right.
John.
Yeah,
So to kind of move us
my
along,
pleasure.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the EV market trends we're seeing, rebates, incentives, and what grants are out there that can maybe help you not only purchase your EV or your first plug-in hybrid, but also can help you put in the chargers that you're going to want to utilize for your new vehicle, right? So what's happening in the market today? I think John just did a really good job of summarizing a lot of the changes that we're seeing, right? But these vehicles have cost savings that are associated with them that are greater than what we see with a traditional ICE vehicle. John mentioned a lot of those, but just a great point, right? Your performance, you're seeing that acceleration, that instant torque that we heard from John. Additionally, we've got sustainability, right? You're doing your part to help the environment. And then battery technology, it continues to improve. We're seeing those increased ranges. I think it's just great. And then that last little bullet that you see down there, they're showing that we've currently got about 175,000 charging ports, and the estimates are that we're going to try to get to 28 million by 2030. So for those who are afraid of the infrastructure not being there and maybe still have a little bit of that range anxiety, despite what John just shared with us, that should start to diminish, right? Because we're seeing the infrastructure is really increasing every year. The pace of innovation is also accelerating, right? So as of last year, we were at about 10% of new sales of vehicles were EV. By 2025, they're suggesting that's going to be about 15%. And what we've seen in Europe and other countries that have really adopted EV early is you fall off the cliff at that point, right? So once we hit that 15%, it's really going to start to jump. So by 2030, we'll see 43% of new car sales up towards EV, and by 2035, all the way up to 60%. Right. So this is only going to continue to improve. It's not going away. So for those of you who are looking at it today, you're at the front end of it, right? So you've got a chance to get in here and really take advantage of the EV market that is continuing to improve. Talking a little bit about some of the trends we're seeing, the vehicles are getting less expensive, range anxiety is going away, battery costs are reduced, EVs aren't new, so the trust that are going into them are increasing, and states are requiring less alternative solutions to liquid fuels, right? So that's the one I really want to hone in on. It's something we haven't quite touched on yet, but as you can see here, we've got zero emission mandates that are out there requiring that these new vehicle sales are going to be EV. So as you see that start to increase with those mandates, with those requirements, we're actually seeing an improvement in those areas. Prime example for that, California is, I think, the one we use as a benchmark a lot of the time. If you compare Maryland to California today, California is playing a bit of a catch-up game with their infrastructure. They have lines at their EV charging stations right now with people waiting to charge their vehicle because there are more people purchasing than they've put in the infrastructure for. In Maryland today, we are actually at a higher rating for our infrastructure because the infrastructure is being put in at a similar rate to the growth of EV adoption. So you start to see that in the Mid-Atlantic right now. We've learned from what we've seen on the West Coast, so that on the East Coast, you're really starting to get more comfortable, right? As you adopt EV, you're not going to run into the same situations and challenges that maybe the early adopters saw on the West Coast, right? Some other things we like to talk about are the rebates, incentives, and grants. Across the board, we're seeing incentives and grants and rebates at federal, state, and utility levels. Most of these programs are set up both for the charging station, whether it's residential, business, or commercial. There are also fleet programs that are out there, and then also for the purchase of the vehicles themselves, right? So whether you buy EV or a plug-in hybrid vehicle, you're likely eligible for some of those rebates. So I know this is a text-heavy slide, but I think it's important information. The federal government's currently offering tax credits for new EVs and plug-in hybrids at $7,500. If it's a used EV or plug-in hybrid, and it's select used, right? So you have to do your research, but you can get up to $4,000 back for a used EV. Additionally, if you then go out and buy your vehicle and you say, all right, well, I've just bought my first EV and I can charge out on the road, or maybe my office offers me, my company offers me free charging or cheaper charging, but I also need one at home, right? So there are tax credits that are out there today for at-home charging stations at about $1,000 up to, depending on where you're located. Additionally, if you've got a business place that's considering EV chargers or a fleet that you're trying to electrify at your workplace, there are other incentives that are there as well. So I'll show you this map. If you've been with us before, you've probably seen it, but anywhere that's that blue or light blue color that is on this map have rebate coverage, right? So what does that mean? That means that there's likely a federal program that's in place. The 30C tax credit that's out there covers most of the states in the United States, really should be all of them, but you've got certain areas that they target, right? So that they're trying to really help underprivileged areas or areas that are in approved census tract, right? Additionally, there are utility rebates in most of these states. So the utility companies are incentivized to help bring EV infrastructure to the areas that they service. So if you're in Maryland, BGE's got a robust program. If you're in Virginia, and we partner with Dominion down there, they will actually help offset 50% of the cost to bring in your EV charging stations, right? If you're somewhere that's serviced by Pepco, they've got a program that's going to help you as well. So we're seeing lots of these utility companies are really leaning in and helping support the infrastructure that's going to be needed for the transition out of ICE vehicles to your common EV or plug-in hybrids, right? Um, if you are looking at a government project, and I know this is a little bit in the weeds, but there are also grants that are out there, CFI grants, NEVI grants. Blue Whale has helped a number of communities, municipalities, government organizations figure out what that's going to look like. So if you're with one of those groups and you've got some grants that you're interested in, or that you want to try to get funding to help put these chargers in for a community or a corridor, we can help you with that. So I'll keep us moving. So a lot of the times we get a question, I'd buy an EV, but I live in a multifamily, right? So in the Maryland area, it's about 50% of the population lives in multifamily housing. Is that going to prevent me from being able to go out and get an EV charger or an EV vehicle, electric vehicle? The answer is no. And the reason why is there's the right to charge, and Blue Whale has helped a number of multifamily communities put in charging stations that can help their residents charge their vehicles, right? So we come out, we can do a business model to help you figure out what's going to be the best approach. We could take a look at the funding that's available. If the grants and the rebates we just talked about, we'll do a site assessment to evaluate, do you have the power you need? And then we'll even help you put in the charging station through installation. We'll get you all the way commissioned, do the onboarding, and even some additional support if you need it. This can be done at the commercial level. We can also help you at the residential level. If you say, listen, I just bought my first EV, I want to put a charger in at my house. What does that look like? Let us know. We can help you figure that out. Your typical charging station, this is or project, this is at a multifamily level, or even at a commercial level. If you want to put in a level 2 charging station, it's going to include design, engineering, electrical considerations, construction, commissioning and training, utility expenses, painting and line striping. If you want to go that direction, you're looking at a project cost that's around 15 to 25, depending on how many spaces you want to electrify. At the home charger level, that price is going to be much lower. You're really only having to put in a charging station that can support the vehicle that you drive. And it's going to help you offset your gas costs as well, along with those rebates we just talked about. It's really starting to get manageable from an expense point of view. We talk about a professional site assessment. We've had some groups that have come to us and said, listen, I need a plan for my entire town, or I need a plan for, 10 multifamily sites. What does that look like? We've got this professional site assessment. It's a built-in report. It's going to tell you what that looks like for all of your different locations. If you seem to fall into that category of, I need to come up with a plan for multiple sites, this is going to be a good option for you, and Blue Whale can help you figure that out, right? Last thing I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to turn some things over to Randy to talk about specifically what does charging look like, is our preventative maintenance program. So whether you've got a home charger, or you're trying to put chargers out front of your office, or you've got a fleet of charging stations, the number one complaint that we hear about from people that drive EV today is, I pulled up to the charging station and it didn't work, right? So anybody who drives EV has run into that. And where that really becomes a challenge is if you're low on battery, you've let it go maybe a little longer than you should have, you pull up to the charging station and it doesn't function, right? So our way to combat that is through a preventative maintenance program. If you've got an EV charging station that you've installed, or you'd like to get one installed with Blue Whale, we can help make sure that those charging stations are up and running, and you never run into the situation where you pull up to one and panic because you don't know what to do and the charging station isn't functioning, right? Sharing a few relevant projects. We've done some dealerships, some multifamily, some utility facilities for utility companies. We've done some for municipalities. You can see there's multifamily, you name it. We can help you get charging stations put in. So with that, I will turn over the mic again to Randy. Randy is going to share with us a little bit about the basics of charging, right? So we've heard that, we can put charging stations in, but what do I need and what does that look like? So Randy, I'm going to turn it over to you from there. Take it away.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nick. And thank you, John. Some great content we've already covered this afternoon. So we're going to continue on with that content. And as Nick mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the EV charging levels. So if you're familiar with EV, you'll know that there's 3 variations of charging on the market. The first is level 1. Level 1 is essentially the kit that you're going to receive at the time when you purchase an electric vehicle. This allows you to connect it into any standard 110 outlet. So if you've got just a 110 outlet in your garage, or you're in a situation where maybe there's not a charger available and you need to put some range back into your vehicle, you have the ability to be able to plug this into any standard 110 outlet. As you can see with the charging time, this is not something you're probably going to be looking to do on a regular basis, just because of the time it's going to take to replace any of that range back in your vehicle. If you've got a typical fully electric vehicle that's got a 200 plus mile range, as you can see just by doing the math, you could be charging for a considerable amount of time with a level 1 charging station. So kind of really just meant to be used in an emergency type of situation or in a pinch. As we move up the ladder, we move into level 2. This is where now we get into our commercial grade stations. So these are meant to be in that public facing sort of situation, whether it's retail, whether it's hospitality, multifamily, like we're talking about today, workplace fleet. These are those commercial grade solutions in which we're looking to deploy the level 2 charging stations. These do power via 208 or a 240 volt line. So typically that level of power is readily available at the majority of properties in which you'll be looking to place the EV charging stations. One of the things too you'll find with the commercial grade units, you're going to see some variations on the connectors. In the previous years, the J1772 was that industry standard. Now we've kind of moved into the NACS or the J3400 plug, which is or been referred to previously as the Tesla standard. So you'll see some of those stations out in the wild now starting to have the NACS plug, or the vast majority of them will have the J1772. As you can see, we cut down the charge time significantly. We go from the many hours, 12 hours plus on level 1, to typically 4 to 8 hours, to have your vehicle charged to 100% capacity based on the range that you need to replenish back into the vehicle. And then just touching real briefly on the installation costs, you can see that can be anywhere from $5,000 on the low end of the spectrum up to $10,000 on the high end. Again, just depending on what's needed from an electrical infrastructure standpoint, will create some variations in that installation costs. As you can see here, you're going to get around 40 up to 65 miles of range, depending on the amperage output of that charging station. So 30 amp on the low end of the spectrum, all the way up to an 80 amp on the high end, producing 19.2 kilowatts on that high end of the spectrum. Then we move into level 3, or fast charging, or DCFC, which you may have heard it referred to in any one of those naming conventions. These are typically the units you're going to find on that highway road trip that John had mentioned, when you're traveling from potentially maybe Maryland to Florida or the Keys, and you're looking to make that journey somewhere along I-95. As John had mentioned, that vehicle is going to map you to those charging stations, those high-level DCFC charging stations, and then allow you to replenish your vehicle to 80, 90%, typically about 30 minutes. You're going to be on your way. So you're able to not only refuel your car, but you stop off and refuel yourself, maybe with some drink and food, and you continue on your way in a relatively short period of time. With these units, you will see 3 variations of connectors out there. We'll see the CCS or CCS1 connector. We'll see the CHAdeMO, which that was used in the early years, vehicles such as the Nissan Leaf. You may still see some of those vehicles out there on the road. And so the CHAdeMO is still available to support those vehicles out in the field. And then again, the NACS, or the Tesla standard, being able to support the Tesla vehicles that are out there, and then the other manufacturers that are going to move towards that NACS or Tesla standard. As you can see with the installation costs, we move up exponentially based on the fact that these are using 480 volts of power versus that readily available 208 or 240. And installation, again, will vary, on the low end of the spectrum, $30,000. And then we could get upwards of, certainly higher costs, just depending on, again, what's needed from an electrical infrastructure standpoint. And typically with DCFC, this is where you're going to have utility engagement that, the property may need to bring in additional power, may need transformers, those sorts of things to support the DCFC. Next slide, Nick. So, as we're talking specifically about the multifamily segment, as you can see here, 58% of renters are willing to pay more to live in a community offering EV charging solutions. And that's the one thing that we've found, throughout this industry, specifically in that multifamily segment, is that they are looking for that sort of amenity at those caliber of properties that offer a variety of different things. And EV charging is one of them. And one of the things that I've always talked about with EV charging as well, it's one of those amenities that, a lot of properties can deploy sustainable initiatives, whether it's LED lighting or different things that promote their sustainability image. But EV charging is very visible. People will know your property or your company's commitment to sustainability when they see the EV charging stations at your property. So, want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of electrifying your multifamily property. We've talked, in some of the previous slides about some of the benefits of actually going to an electric vehicle. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits as to why you want to electrify your property. And as I talk to a lot of clients, and I always tell them it's not a question of if you need to add charging stations, it's a question of when and how many. And so here are some of the benefits as to, why you want to deploy EV charging stations at your property. Number one, attract more tenants and increase retention. As John mentioned, EV drivers seek out EV charging stations through apps via PlugShare and other methodology to find those charging stations. So if you've got a multifamily dwelling and you want to put it on the map and have people find you, put it on PlugShare and let people know that you've got charging stations at your community. I guarantee you it's going to bring those individuals to your property and they're going to want to check out your property, because if you're an EV driver, whether you're looking for a multifamily dwelling or maybe a hotel, you're going to seek out those properties that can accommodate your need being an EV driver. The next, increasing property value. Certainly, it allows an increase in that property value by deploying those EV charging stations, but then it's also going to separate yourself from the competition. You can be a property amongst many thousands of properties and that EV drivers or potential candidates will look at, or you can be a select few properties that have made a commitment and differentiated yourself from your competition by adding an amenity such as EV charging. One of the things, too, you're going to start to see, and we have seen that in many local city regulations and ordinances, is where they're starting to put requirements in place for new construction to be EV ready, so that they want to know that there's EV charging stations in place for that property to get their CO. So if you want to stay ahead of those, regulations and some of those ordinances that are putting, in place, adopt EV charging stations into your project when you're at construction phases or design stages. It's a lot more advantageous to do it at that phase of the project than after you've already moved into or opened up the dwelling, and then you've got to go through permitting, and you've got to go through, the installation process, which could potentially meaning, getting underneath asphalt and concrete. So it's far more advantageous to do it at design stages. So, to be ahead of the game. You're going to have the ability to tap into an additional revenue stream, meaning you're going to be able to charge a fee to the EV driver for using that charging station. And that's entirely up to you as far as how you want to implement your program. And then finally, as we'd mentioned, EV charging stations are very, very visible to the community. So they're going to be able to see them and they know that you're, a leader and committed to sustainability in your community or within your organization. We can go to you're on mute, Nick.
I did want to share, I see a number of questions coming in that we want to answer as well. So, Randy, I think maybe touch through the different types of chargers, and then we'll jump on a few of those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We can jump right through this. So wanted to just kind of really share in the next couple of slides, just some of the products that you may see, specifically for the multifamily dwelling. This one here, the HQ200, this is designed really for that multifamily type of property that is what I would call the garden style community, to where maybe you've got an attached garage or attached carport that you want to be able to provide charging to your client or to your tenant. This is a great product for that. We can jump through the next couple quick, Nick, so we can get to those questions for you. Our Series 7, and then the next slide after this is our Series 7 Plus. The biggest differentiating factor between these two stations is the output. One is at 48 amp, the other is at 80 amp. So we're looking at maybe 9 to 10 kilowatts on the 48 amp, or we can be at the 80 amp all the way up to 19.2 kilowatts. but the same features, dual unit, J1772, have the ability to implement access control and revenue capture policies. Authentication can take place via smartphone application, RFID card, a variety of methods to initiate the charging session. Series 7 and Series 8 and Series 8 Plus. As you can see, and looking at these stations, they are very, very similar in nature to that of the Series 7. And you may be asking, well, what's the biggest difference between these two? The biggest difference between the Series 7 and the Series 8 is on the Series 8, there's actually a forward-facing credit card reader. So if you're deploying these charging stations maybe into a clubhouse where you're going to have multiple users or you're going to make them available to the general public, or you're deploying them at a hospitality community, this is where you can have the ability to have an EV driver simply use their credit card, tap to pay, Apple Pay, Google Pay, and initiate the charging session that way. Series 7, Series 8, all of these stations can be either wall mounted or pedestal mounted as you see there.
Thank you very much, Randy, for running through some options for people. I know that's one of the big things is where do I start, right? And I think there's so much that's out there that's available. It's good to have a direction.
Yep.
So with that in mind, we've got a couple of really good questions actually coming in from the group that are watching today. And one of them I think applies directly, Randy, to the charging itself, and some of what you just talked about. So for non-Tesla EV owners that use adapters to use a Tesla charger, will the car get the same throughput as a Tesla car would get when charging? And I'd say it's vice versa as well, right? So if you're going the other direction, is that adapter taking away anything from your charging session?
Yeah, great question. The answer is no. Essentially, the adapter is really just providing a method to change the plug configuration. So you're not, losing any of that energy, transferring through an adapter and vice versa, whether it's Tesla to J1772 and vice versa. There's going to be no energy loss in utilizing that adapter.
Great. I'll put this question out to both of you. I think, John, you might have a good answer for it, but it says, is there a battery pack that can be recommended to people with range anxiety that they could put in their frunk that could give them an extra 10 to 20 miles charge if they hit a 0% on their battery, akin to an ICE vehicle keeping an additional a gas can in the back of their truck? Have you heard of anything like that?
No, I have not. Not
Okay.
yet. I know the new Cybertruck comes with a battery pack that you can get extra and you can put it into bed, but they haven't launched it yet. But that's the closest thing to that. And it's not something you take in and out. You put it in and it's in because it's way too heavy to pick up. But nothing small like that. Yeah.
Now, Randy, I think Blink has a mobile option for people that have a little bit of charge anxiety. So can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so we do. We have a mobile charger. We've seen clients such as towing services and those sorts of entities that want to be able to provide, for example, like a AAA, they want to be able to provide that level of support to their customers in the event that they do get into a situation where they need to, have the vehicle refueled along the side of the road. So we do offer a mobile charger that does allow for that.
I'll share. We have a Ford Transit van here at Blue Whale. We lovingly refer to it as the mothership, really a billboard on wheels. It gets about 90 miles per charge. We have one of the Blink mobile chargers specifically for that vehicle, and it's necessary. So just to put that out there. We have a question about what are some of the maintenance differences between EVs versus gasoline? Do they still need oil changes? Do they have the same tire wear? John, I think you touched on that a little bit already, but just a very succinct, what does an EV need that ICE doesn't? And is there anything that's added, right? So can you just real briefly recap that for us?
Yeah, there's no routine maintenance with EVs. As far as the tires go, they do wear out a little bit quicker. I haven't had that experience. Gotten 60,000 miles out of the first two sets of tires that I've had, but since they are a little bit heavier EVs than gasoline cars, supposedly the tires wear quicker. But a lot of that also has to do with you stomping on the accelerator because they're so much fun to drive. So you do tend to, yeah.
Fair enough.
but no
Um,
routine maintenance, zero.
Very good. And then we had a question here. I don't know that we're going to be able to answer this in depth in the time that we have left here, but we can certainly follow up. The question is, can you tell us the miles per gallon right, for each car option that we're showcasing here? So I believe we've got some good supporting documentation we can share. What I'll do is I'll make sure we include just a little breakdown, a chart that we've seen of some of the vehicles that are out there and what their electric miles look like on those batteries. We'll include that when we send out the slides and a video of what we covered today. So I think those were the four questions we got in from the group. We had a few others that we were going to cover as part of our presentation. I think most of these have been touched on, but I'm going to quickly just run through the list and make sure there's nothing that we missed. I do think number 2 is one that I want to point out again. Will I be able to save any money by switching to an electric vehicle? With a short yes or no. John, yes or no?
Yes,
Randy,
definitely.
yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes, guys. Switching to an electric vehicle is going to save you some money, both on gas and on maintenance. It's a little bit of an upfront cost from what we've seen now, but prices are coming down on these EVs. You're going to save money by switching. Should you start with an EV or a hybrid? I think we've covered a really good sample size of what the differences are in those vehicles. It's really going to be a case by case basis. If you're just looking for something that's going to get you around town, but you need some more safety for longer range. Hybrid's probably a good stepping stone, but really a full EV is going to cover a lot of what you need. And I really recommend taking a look at those if you are looking at your next vehicle. If I could quote the CEO of Rivian, he said that to buy an ICE in today's day and age, in 2020s, it would be equivalent of buying a horse in 1918 after the car came out. Right. So really the world is moving on. We need to start looking at EV and hybrid as our solution. Last one, let's see. What do the incentives and rebates look like? I think we covered that. And can I charge at any charging station in the public? That's going to be the last one I cover, and then I'll let people move on with their day. The short answer is most charging stations are going to be able to charge your vehicle. Tesla is the only one today that's specific to the NACS plug. There are adapters that are out there. If you buy a Tesla, they're going to give you an adapter. You can also buy adapters on Amazon at a pretty regular basis. What I would recommend is for your home charger, your base charger that you're going to use on a day-to-day basis, get the plug that matches your vehicle. Don't charge every day on an adapter if you can help it. But the adapters are pretty good. So I think with that, we'll close up our Q&A section for now. I want to say thank you to everybody that's attended, whether it was just today or any of the other sessions that were part of our 4-part series. We are going to bring the series back next year. So look for us again. We're going to make sure to get these in front of people. We'll have lots more questions to go over, lots more information as the industry continues to evolve and move forward. In the meantime, if you have any questions for myself, John, or Randy, please feel free to reach out to us either in response to the slides that we send out, or you can follow us on LinkedIn or join us at our website. In the meantime, I would like to say thank you to both John and Randy for taking the time today. Really appreciate both of your insights. I know John is truly an EV expert and can share plenty of insight. And Randy, I know, has been a front runner in the world of EV charging. You've been in it for a while, and I know you're the guy I come to when I have questions. So I appreciate that. So thank you guys both. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great day. We will end it there. Have a
Thank
good one.
you.
Thanks.